Being an unconventional Asian is a journey. It means unpacking those narratives in our head that we want to question. That process takes unlearning. But that's how we break away from the stereotypes. But if we want to celebrate uniqueness within the Asian community, we have to do it for other races too. So today we have Alice Tsui, a pianist from Brooklyn, New York, to share with us her journey in how teaching music in a primarily Black and Brown community helped reshape her narrative. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories and conversations on the road to unconventional. Now we have a private Facebook group called Whiteness Complex, which is a community to help share insights, experiences, and actionable tips on how we can forge our own path. And you can find the link in the description box below. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Unconventional Asians, where we share content and resources to help Asians cultivate the skills to forge their own path.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
How long have you been doing what you do?
My piano background, I've been playing since I was 4 years old. I've always really loved playing piano and knew pretty early on in life that I wanted to do music and I wanted to be a teacher. So I went to NYU for my undergrad in piano performance and I got my master's there in music education. And since then, I founded a music program in a public elementary school in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a lifelong Brooklyn, New Yorker, so I feel very passionately about my roots. Something that's awesome about our school is that it's really not just music as something extra, but very foundational and everything that is part of the program and the school overall. So we start every day with song and chant. There's song and chant throughout the whole school day. Kids get one type of arts, whether it's music, art, or dance, every day.
Wow.
So it's really truly inclusive in that way. Even though I'm the minority in amongst both students and also faculty, I feel that it's really amazing to be able to work alongside so many people who are people of color or BIPOC. And in that way, there is solidarity that can be between different people of color.
Yeah, which is amazing in times like this. We definitely need to stand up for that.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you think you have realized throughout the years working with, BIPOC and everybody, that most people might not known or stereotype people to be?
Even though I went to school with some kids who were Black, I didn't necessarily go out to become friends with them. And just that experience throughout my life, I feel like, plus what my parents felt about Black people, which often are racist things, I think that really shifted a ton, honestly, once I started to work in the current school that I do. And it was just really eye-opening to better understand them as people, honestly. I feel like so often we, Asian people, continue to add on to the anti-Blackness that's in our society, which is so unfortunate. But how many Black friends do we have that we are able to just chat with? Or how many people do we actually, who do we surround ourselves with? And I think that people need to be intentional if you're really trying to, you can read all you want about history and culture, and that's important, but it's also important to actually interact with others.
That's a really good point. Do you remember one story that I guess stuck out to you?
I was teaching the song I Believe I Can Fly by R. Kelly before I knew about all the terrible things of R. Kelly. So this is early in my first year, I think, of teaching. And I thought it was just going to be a great moment where we would all close our eyes and really listen to the music before singing it. And then once the students were done listening to it, I saw some kids crying, and I personally just thought oh wow, they're so moved by the music. But upon further discussion in class, I basically found out that that song had been used at a couple of funerals, and I didn't know that. And I think that the fact that so many people associate it in different ways whether it's in a like inspiring way or maybe it's in a remembrance kind of way. It was just very surprising to me because then once one person said it, a couple of other kids had had that same experience. And this is not
Mm,
to blanketly say that all African American or Black children have this experience, but
right.
rather just those, there are certain things that once you get to know kids and once you have that connection, you're able to discuss it. But at the same time, it can be traumatizing
Mm.
to have to relive that experience through music as well.
Like I've never thought of it that way, and I guess every issue can be perceived differently too, in life in general, right? But
Absolutely.
we can be as inclusive and accepting as possible, but we won't know what we don't know, right? So
Yeah,
it's
and
to
that's
kind of start that.
dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's just to start the conversation and not blame each other for not knowing, because sometimes we can't know everything either.
I definitely know now to more instinctively apologize and
Mm,
not just apologize for the sake of saying sorry or because I hurt someone's feelings, but reflecting and understanding why this can be painful, whatever situation it is, and taking ownership of that. Like I always felt like I had to proceed, everything I had to do was with caution because I not only because I was the minority in the group, but also because everyone else, like I just had never interacted with so many Black people in my life. That's just a fact. And neither have my parents. So
right.
I think it was just from a place of, oh, I don't know what I can or cannot say, and this it's not exactly fear, maybe partially, but just like a hesitation, I suppose.
Mm.
So I think they just would say to be careful, but I feel like even just saying that, it's like, oh, so you think that it's more dangerous than maybe to be around the African American community than it is to be around Asian community. Like there's levels to my parents' like few words.
Mm.
Whenever they try to give advice, it's like very, very small bites, but I know that behind that there's layers of either colonized mentality or just or immigrant mentality. Those kind of go hand in hand too.
Yeah. But I think that goes back to we don't know what we don't know. And
Yeah,
it's like more like a protective mechanism that they just have good intentions and want you to be safe or whatever. But at the same time, I think people have evolved, and especially immigrants or people who have been globalized, we're becoming more and more, I guess, mixed and unified in terms of our mentality, right? There, I guess in history, we did do our separate things with our separate customs and cultures, but because of travel and the convenience of that, we are able to learn from each other, and eventually, hopefully, we're all able to kind of be together and win as one, and think like one. But right now, I think we're just in that process.
again about my parents and just what they perceive of when I teach Black children. I think that sometimes they put the savior mentality on me, like, oh, like
Mm,
our daughter is doing such a great deed by teaching these children how to play instruments and how to make music. But that's differently said than if I just taught Asian, if I taught Asian kids or if I taught white kids.
mm,
So I think it's an interesting mentality there. And if I take it back to my extended family in China, who they're in Shanghai, and that's a very, that's very homogenous for the most part, even though Shanghai is more globalized than a lot of other cities. I would say that the questions that I've gotten from them, like, do they have to be so black, for example, when they see pictures, is very hard to hear because I
mm.
again know that it comes from a place of not interacting with black people, but already it's like going back to like how um, Asians really uphold this like whiteness complex, like the whiter you are, or like I can't go into the sun in the summer because I'll get tan and those levels too.
There's a lot of dismantling that we need to do. I mean, the movement right now, it's bringing up that conversation and awareness, and we have to start somewhere, right? What are your plans going forward in terms of like, I guess, helping with the community? Are you doing anything right now currently with that?
prefer to say that I'm actively anti-racist, because
Yeah.
it's not just about the reading, it's about interrupting
Yes.
your own thoughts every day. Like, oh, why
Hmm.
did I have that thought? Why did I have this thought? So,
Yes.
so much of anti-racism work is behind the scenes. It will never be captured on camera if it's actually true, because it's in your own brain or in journaling or whatever form, and in music making as well. So for me, activism exists within my teaching and also just my advocacy in music education as a field. Music education is extremely white in America. I just found out the statistic that there's only less than 3% of America's education force is Asian. It's important to just have conversations, but then at the same time, it's very hard because that's a lot of emotional labor. So I really do try to balance that, but I do think that conversations of like, you can't like a white person can't just write a song that has certain types of sounds and call it like the dragon dance. That's not okay.
Right.
Similarly, like you can't just like put drums in a song and call it like African tribal something, which is all over the place in music ed. So that's like the surface level. And then it's like, okay, what is actually considered music education? I love Beethoven. I'm classically trained pianist. I really do. But also, he's not more important or less important than like Jay-Z, or he's also not more or less important than Hamilton right now, which is the hot topic of debate.
And do you have that conversations with your students?
Yes, I very actively talk to my students about racism, activism. I think that if anything, the Black Lives Matter movement, um, it started a long time ago. It's not new, but and we've performed pieces and songs, but it's very easy to say that you once again like sing a song and now you're done. It's really more about, okay, what are you doing every day? So a couple of very heartbreaking things that my students have said in the beginning of June. um, I remember it so clearly. It was 8 a.m. remote teaching, um, after the George Floyd death and a couple of other deaths in the United States. And the kids come into class and already they're talking about, or they want to talk about, why why is this happening to us? Being Black is not a crime. These are quotes from them. And sometimes I wonder if white people think we're human. These are statements from kids who are 10 and 11 years old. It's just really, really hard to hear that, but also understand that this is their lived reality. I don't know that I would have the same level of understanding if I wasn't teaching my students. The argument, for example, in education that's often so rampant is, well, I don't have these kids in my community to teach, or I only have one or two kids, so I don't need to talk about race. If anything, I think it's even more important, because you're raising the kids who are going to ultimately impact my kids. Like, our kids are going to grow up and be America together, right? But also be okay with them not wanting to share, because it's really traumatizing for them to even share these thoughts in this way. And that can't be done without trust.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess we all have to start with ourselves first, right? Like you said, kind of being aware of the thoughts that are programmed into us and detach from it and deprogram from it, and then start the conversation with other people, whoever that we're with, doesn't matter what race. And then when we can all I guess, have a safe environment that people can feel heard and seen and understood, that's when things can shift.
Another conversation I have with a lot of Asian friends is about the model minority myth,
Yeah.
which I don't think everyone fully understands to its full extent, because the model minority myth does seek to separate and divide as opposed to actually unify, and it's rooted in anti-Blackness. I was just reading a really great piece by Viet Thanh Nguyen, who wrote The Sympathizer and the Refugees, and he talks about um, how being Asian, you're like always going to be in this middle ground,
Yes.
basically.
Yes. Yeah.
But you're on this middle ground, but stepping on the backs of Black and Indigenous people, whether you know it or not. So
Right.
it is very relevant to have these conversations. But it's interesting because with COVID, so many Asian people only care about the anti-Asianness, but not about the anti-Blackness, and it's connected. There's no like, it's not so evenly split.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that Asian people can take more of an ownership in yes, anti-Asian hate is terrible, but anti-blackness is worse.
It's tough because I think the stereotypes that has instilled in the Asian mentality is the model minority, right? So, and also like not speaking up and just being more submissive. Hence why a lot of people might not be able to speak up right now, because it's so ingrained in us that it's hard to break that patterning. But it just, again, everything starts with awareness.
I matter, you matter, we matter. And I don't think kids say that they matter themselves enough. And I really believe in the power of affirmation. I don't think I ever said as a kid that I matter. And I don't actually even think that my parents ever said those words, not even in Chinese, to me. But that's really important for a sense of self-esteem and identity. The fact that you can tell yourself that you matter, and then you're constantly hearing from other people that you matter. So that's what I hope is always at the core as well of identity and being together.
Oh, thank you so much. You gave us so much value. So where can the audience find you?
So I'm on Instagram at Music with Miss Alice, MISSALICE, and my website is alicetsui.com. I teach privately online as well. I actually have been for a bit before COVID, just because of my own schedule. It's hard to try to go to everyone at this point, since I do have a lot of other commitments. So yeah, it's all online.
Perfect. Yeah, if anybody wants to learn how to play piano with Miss Alice, we'll link her, like find her information below. Now we have a private Facebook group called Asian Wellness Collective, which is a community to help share insights, experiences, and actionable tips on how we can forge our own path. And you can find the link in the description box below. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Unconventional Asians, where we share content and resources to help Asians cultivate the skills to forge their own path. Until next time, dare to be authentic.